Without awareness, you have no power. Mindful awareness is the foundation to directing our lives. It is a central tenet that guides my teaching, my clinical work, and my own personal life path. We hear the term mindfulness thrown around. It's almost become cliché over the last few years. But the scientific research on mindfulness is compelling. When we practice intentional awareness, it changes us. It moves us towards increasing resilience, physical health, and emotional happiness. Today I'll break down what mindfulness really is, how to weave it into your life in fairly simple ways, and know that as you intentionally practice mindfulness, it starts to become who you are and how you navigate life. The more aware you become, the more empowered you are in directing your life path. Mindfulness is a practice that leads us toward ever-increasing wellness. Welcome to Root Cause of Happiness. I'm Dr. Sarah Bryn Morrow, licensed psychologist, therapeutic yoga teacher, and optimal wellness educator. I teach the physiology of mental health and the skills to overcome suffering at the root cause. My intention is to empower others to become increasingly resilient by understanding the many pieces of the puzzle to deep healing. Please join me as we explore the root cause of happiness. What is mindfulness? It sounds very simple. Being mindful. But what it really means is to, on purpose, pay attention to the present moment, and without judging that moment as good or bad. It's very common that we are aware and we make observations, but our default mode has the mind judging the things we observe as good or bad, like it, don't like it, should or shouldn't be what we observe. So the challenging part of mindfulness is not necessarily to be aware and observe, but to resist the mind judging our observations, to hold awareness in a state of equanimity in which we just allow the present moment to be exactly as it is. So what are the different things we can be aware of? Typically, we think about mindful awareness of the body. So we have a lot of therapies now that encourage people to tune into their senses, to come out of a stress response by, on purpose, noticing objects you can see, smell, feel, taste, and to notice the sensations to help get out of that stream of automatic negative thought and back into the present moment. So your senses are always there, processing the world in that moment, noticing the sights, the objects, the colors around you, noticing any smells or sounds in the environment, perhaps noticing a sense of touch, or in therapeutic yoga, we talk about touch points, noticing the places in which the body is in contact with any objects, like the floor beneath your feet, or the chair you're sitting on, or even the clothing touching the skin. So our senses are always in the present moment, and they can anchor us into the here and now. So we can pause and scan through the body and notice the sensations of the present moment. Additionally, we can practice mindfulness by tuning into the breath. The breath is always now. We never are remembering a breath we took 5 minutes ago, and we're never planning a breath 5 minutes from now. When we tune into the breath, it is an anchor to the present moment. We are aware that we are breathing in, and we are aware that we are breathing out. Beyond knowing we're breathing, we might feel the movement of the body with the breath, belly rising on inhale and relaxing back on exhale. We might also notice the feeling of air flowing across the upper lip and nostril, the speed or temperature of that airflow. So we can anchor to the breath in any moment to come out of emotion, stress, reactivity. We can pause and notice the breath and use that breath as an anchor to keep our mind in the present moment. From sensation and the breath, we can tune into thought. As I've mentioned in some other videos, the mind thinks a lot. We have tens of thousands of thoughts per day, and usually we're not aware of most of those thoughts. We just simply can't possibly pay attention to that constant stream of cognitive processing. So our thoughts are typically like background noise. They're always there. They're affecting us emotionally, but for the most part, we're not listening. So a mindfulness practice is to tune in to automatic stream of thought. So this cognitive awareness can be really sometimes challenging because we'll feel like thoughts are intruding. They're kind of butting in when they're not welcome. But your power in training the mind to think differently or shifting the thinking mind in the present moment towards more helpful or adaptive thoughts that will help us cope is to practice pausing and listening. Just pause and notice. And then the hard part in mindfulness is to not judge what we observe as good or bad. From thinking of sensation and breath and thoughts, we can also come into emotion. Sometimes we don't want to acknowledge our emotions. Sometimes we just wish those emotions would go away, and we might choose other responses to emotion, such as numbing or distraction or kind of pushing those feelings away because they can be painful or make us feel really vulnerable. So a mindfulness practice can be getting to know your emotions. Gosh, I have discomfort right now. I'm feeling upset. What might I call this emotion? Are there thoughts going through my mind that are fueling this feeling I'm having? How does this emotion, perhaps we'll call it anxiety, feel in the sensation of the body? How do I feel that in my stomach being uncomfortable, my heart rate, my pattern of breath, where my muscles are tensing or feeling restless? Of course, this is another opportunity to turn to a mirror, to come to a mirror, to assess, where am I holding this pain? Am I holding painful emotion into the energy of my face, into the energy of the eyes? And from that awareness, can I shift the pieces of that emotion that are within my control? So we can also be aware of emotion. From awareness, we can begin to choose an intentional response. Finally, the last area of mindful options we have is in the environment around us, especially including the people that we are with. So we might tune into the setting we are in, the people that are around us, the sensation that comes to that moment, but also this interpersonal mindfulness. So some awareness that I have thoughts and feelings in this moment, but this other person also is having their own unique thoughts and feelings. In parenting, I think mindfulness can be so helpful to deepening our attachment with our children, to pause and really take in the fullness of our children, the light in their eyes, the dimples in their cheeks when they smile, hearing their laughter come from the heart, seeing their moments of joy and feeling this sympathetic joy as we observe our child having a positive life experience. So interpersonal mindfulness is really powerful. There's actually quite a lot of research now showing that interpersonal mindfulness is very effective to help heal broken marriages or broken relationships. So as we train couples to be intentionally mindful of each other's thoughts, feelings, and needs, we start to treat each other better. We start to come out of our ego and defensiveness and more into a state of empathy and compassion, or perhaps generosity, or expressing gratitude to each other. So we can really enhance the health of our relationships, but also our own mental health and physical health through practicing intentional awareness. So you might have heard of a pretty famous mindfulness expert called John Kabat-Zinn. He developed what's now called the Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction Program over in Massachusetts. And this program started in the 1970s, so he was way ahead of his time. And John Kabat-Zinn did this huge positive service to Western healthcare by bringing mindfulness practices, including meditation and gentle yoga and breath awareness, and bringing this into Western medical models of how we treat patients. And boy, have they found incredible outcomes in improving pain and suffering, and even how long people survive with cancer and levels of experienced chronic pain. One of John Kabat-Zinn's most famous books is called Full Catastrophe Living, Using the Wisdom of Your Body and Mind to Face Stress, Pain, and Illness. That book was first published in 1990, but the latest edition came out in 2013, and it is a lengthy read with thousands of studies showing how powerful mindfulness can be in helping us overcome any medical hardships or be able to endure and cope and be resilient as we go through difficult medical experiences. So the research on mindfulness is pretty compelling and frankly very vast across fields now at this point. We know that mindfulness practices are very helpful in improving the ability to mentally focus and maintain some control over our attention abilities. So, of course, for people that have ADHD, attention deficit disorder, mindfulness practices are all the more important because we actually can look at the structure of the brain and see changes in the parts of the brain that control attention and focus. I have a long list here in my notes of some of the research findings on things we know that mindfulness practices can improve. So we see things like increasing overall experience of positive emotion while reducing negative emotion. Some research has even shown that mindfulness practices are as effective in treating depression as antidepressant medication, but mindfulness has the additional benefit of reducing chances of relapse. So we don't really see that typically with medication use. If you take antidepressants to get through an acute depressive episode, your chance of subsequent depressive episodes might actually increase slightly. But if you learn mindfulness techniques, it can not only help you overcome your depression in a similar powerful effectiveness as medication, but it can reduce your chance of having any further depression later on in life. We know that mindfulness is really helpful in trauma. So trauma often leads to some dissociation, some numbness, often being almost scared to tune in to the body and sensation. So there's a loss of sense of safety in the body. And we're finding that mindfulness practices are incredibly helpful to add to the healing of trauma therapy. So we can have different mindful awareness practices, including things like gentle yoga or mindful walking, or even gentle things like qigong and tai chi, these slow, mindful kind of ancient martial arts that are really about moving meditation and nourishing and taking care of the body. There's research showing that our immune system is improved through mindfulness, that we actually don't get as sick as often. Why would that be? It has to do with the physiological balance of the body. When we practice awareness, it anchors us to the present moment, in which we are almost always safe. There are always some life issues we're contending with, but when you pause and notice, typically in this moment, we are able to handle what's immediately in front of us. When we can do that and give these safety signals back to the brain, the sympathetic nervous system calms down, the parasympathetic relaxation response kicks in, and we change the physiology of the body. We actually know that meditation and mindfulness can change genetic expression towards wellness and away from disease. So we know that the immune system is benefited through mindfulness. We see better outcomes even for people enduring cancer when they join a mindfulness practice or do something like the mindfulness-based stress reduction program. We also know that relationships improve, as I mentioned. Children behave better in school. So that's another exciting area of research for me as a child psychologist, is that we're seeing some schools integrating mindfulness training into the classroom, helping students in school learn to pause and notice, to tune into their inner world, their breath, their body. Maybe even some very simple basic yoga poses could be part of a way of helping children come out of their mind and their stress and into their body to self-regulate. And so we're seeing there's enhancements in learning and academic outcomes and reductions in behavioral problems for children that have gone through some of that training in mindfulness. There's research that shows that mindfulness will increase the density of brain cells in the areas of the brain linked to learning, memory, emotion regulation, and empathy. We also know that, as I mentioned, mindfulness improves the ability to focus, remember, and achieve goals. Relationships improve, stress comes down, there's a reduction in pain. So we're seeing really exciting research in the chronic pain world to know that mindfulness practices, breathing techniques can actually reduce people's experience and threshold of pain, including things like back pain and knee pain. Some of the studies you might wonder, like, how can that be? But it's really about this interconnected mind-body system. When we can take care of what's going on in the mind, be aware of the present moment, the body's physiology shifts towards well-being and to that self-healing capacity of the body, or ideal function of the immune system, and regulating that inflammation process tied to the immune system. So mindfulness practices are a way that we can strategically increase our overall resilience over time. It trains us to be able to notice when we've been triggered by some stressor, or we've been taken over by a negative emotion, or we're being reactive and drawn into conflict. And it can help us catch ourselves and kind of hit this reset button to come back into balance and to be able to choose response, to choose how to breathe, how to shift what's going on in the physical body, in our posture, in our facial expression, to choose how to communicate, to realize that reactivity is detrimental, but I can choose to communicate from this place of helping other people understand my feelings and needs, and also keeping my mind and heart open to understanding the other person's feelings and needs. So all of these tools are very simple, but they help increase our overall empowerment in life to really create the life that we wish to have. So there's little ways we can practice mindfulness. I'm sure everybody has heard of meditation, and I really think of meditation as just one technique that helps train the brain towards increasing mindful awareness. But sitting meditation is definitely not easy and not for everyone. I think we should all work on it, whether you do a 30-second meditation and try to increase that to a minute or two, and maybe your goal is to be able to sit in stillness and quiet for 5 minutes. But it is difficult and sometimes feels tedious and uncomfortable or frustrating to do sitting meditation, or just boring. We're so used to being constantly stimulated or entertained or active that just sitting can be uncomfortable and boring for many people. So we also have options to do moving mindfulness practices. So that could be brought into any form of movement and exercise that you choose. There's a whole field and research on walking meditation, to just be fully aware of all the sensation in body, in touch points as feet touch the ground, in synchronizing movement and breath. And we know walking meditation can be really beneficial. Yoga, from my point of view, in an ideal practice, is a form of moving meditation. That ideally you find a yoga class and teacher in which mindfulness is the most essential goal and principle guiding that yoga practice. So that would mean a yoga class in which we honor those few minutes of sitting meditation, that centering practice in the beginning of class to kind of drop into that space and get grounded. And we also honor the Shavasana deep relaxation practice at the end of class, in which we try to sink into stillness and allow ourselves to just let go for that last few minutes in a yoga practice. I believe that any exercise can be done mindfully. Even if you're lifting weights and doing strength training, try to be aware through that. Try to notice how you're breathing, where you might be holding tension unnecessarily, any facial expressions that might be communicating torture or threat back to the nervous system, and to keep the breath flowing from nose to belly, synchronizing breath with movement, keeping the mind steady in the present moment, not judging the exercise as good or bad, but perhaps balancing effort with ease, that intentional, essential self-compassion to make sure that exercise stays within that realm of beneficial and healthy and doesn't accidentally become a stressor in which our nervous system is feeling some threat because the exercise is too much for us, at least in that moment, in that day. So we can really bring mindful awareness into any movement. But sometimes we don't even have time to exercise, and certainly yoga is not for everyone, and meditation is not for everyone, but we can practice awareness and weave it into our day-to-day life. So a couple situations I try to remember to be mindful in are when I'm driving in my car and I hit a red light. Those delays can feel annoying and frustrating often, and I try to remember to use that sitting and waiting opportunity to practice full awareness. So I'll try to be aware of my body and what it feels like to hold the steering wheel of the car, the touch points of how my body is supported in the seat of the car, to look around me and be more aware of the outer world, the scenery, the landscape in front of me, to be aware of my breath and try to use that moment of pause as a chance to breathe intentionally, deepening the inhale, belly rising to allow that diaphragm to draw downward, and exhaling a little more slowly, trying to slow the rate of the breath. Also, we end up being delayed waiting in lines, like at the store. So when you're shopping and there's a line and you have to wait and be patient, try to use that as a chance for full awareness. Notice your feet on the floor and try to balance the weight distribution across your feet evenly. Try to be aware of what's around you, the other people, the sights, the smells, whatever is present in that moment. Just try to anchor the mind and stay aware. And then before you know it, you won't be waiting anymore and you'll probably lose that awareness. But when you have to wait and you have to be patient, view it as an opportunity to enhance your capacity for awareness. I also wash a lot of dishes. If you've listened to any of my lectures on nutrition, you'll know that food is incredibly important to me in my life and how I feed my family. And so washing dishes is part of that commitment and that work of cooking real food every day. So rather than being resentful or annoyed that there are always dishes to wash, I actually try to use dishwashing as a mindfulness practice. So I'll on purpose tune in to my feet on the floor, where are my shoulders, and shifting my posture, noticing the feeling of that dish in my hand, the weight, the water, the soap, the smell, the sound, and just really embrace that 10 minutes or whatever I have to wash dishes as a chance to try to be aware as much as I can be. Now, inherently, your mind will wander. That's just what the mind does. And so rather than being frustrated that you can't hold steady awareness, whenever you catch that you've been distracted in thought, just come back to say, oh yes, I was going to try to hold awareness while I do this chore. So we can use these tests of patience, these somewhat boring activities and chores, as a way to be intentionally aware, knowing that with practice, we get more and more able to hold that awareness and that be more of our default way that the brain is working. So weave these things into life. When you brush your teeth, don't multitask. Just try to be fully aware of what that feels like, sounds like, smells like, tastes like, to be aware while you brush your teeth. Hopefully twice a day, that gives you an opportunity. Now, you might hear this lecture and think, yeah, I'll work on that, and then quickly forget that that was an intention you had set. So you might want to leave yourself some visual reminders around your home, even in your car, at your office. If you're a student and you have your primary binder you bring to school, put a little note or something in your binder that tells you every time I sit down in class and bring this out, I'll see that little symbol or note I wrote to myself that reminds me, take a moment to be aware. So we might just want to have a heart posted on our bathroom mirror. We know that that is a cue to remember to try to be aware as we do whatever needs done there in the bathroom. And so we can create little visual reminders. Some people will use their technology to practice more mindfulness. So of course there are all kinds of apps now that will help you commit to a meditation practice or help give you little cues throughout your day to be mindful. And so you might even set some alarms in your phone to remind you a couple times a day to try to honor this need for intentional awareness practice. If you're willing to, have that alarm cue you to try to take a 1-minute meditation, just to pause and go inward and sink into that stillness for 1 minute. So any which way you can use daily habits or circumstances or visual cues or little alarms and technology cues to increase the chances that you will be intentionally aware many times throughout the day. If you do this, your brain starts to change. We can see the structural changes through functional MRI and know that the brain changes are beneficial for mental health, emotion regulation, memory, and even preventing dementia. So some of the research that keeps me committed to this mindfulness practice in my life is that we see that people who have been practicing meditation for a long time, when they become elderly, their brain structurally looks many, many years younger than their same age peers who do not have a mindfulness practice. And so as we all age, I think we'd so like to keep the brain in good health, maintain our cognitive function as we move into our elderly chapter of life. And mindfulness is probably one of the most powerful things we can do for ourselves to age with optimal health. So mindfulness is this simple sounding concept of being aware of the present moment without judging the moment as good or bad, but to hold ourselves in a state of equanimity, to just accept things as they are right now, realizing that this moment will pass and be replaced by a new moment. This emotion will pass. The concept of impermanence is really powerful. It allows us to endure difficult moments, knowing that inherently change is inevitable. I'd like to close this lecture with a quote from Jon Kabat-Zinn that I think is really lovely. Jon Kabat-Zinn says, "Tiny shifts in viewpoint, in attitude, and in your efforts to be present can have enormous effects on your body, on your mind, and in the world. Even the tiniest manifestation of mindfulness in any moment might give rise to an intuition or insight that could be hugely transforming. It is this process of coming to terms with things as they are that embodies the process of healing. I would really encourage you to read more from Jon Kabat-Zinn. He also has many free lectures online on YouTube, and he really is a beautiful human being that is bringing this concept of secular mindfulness and non-spiritual meditation practices, breathing practices, gentle yoga into the field of Western medicine, in which we're really empowering patients to take control of the pieces of their health journey that they do have some choice in, realizing that while we medically may have something difficult that we are facing, and we have to trust and rely on our doctors and healthcare providers, there are things I can do for myself that will help me endure what cannot be cured and cure what need not be endured. That's a saying by BKS Iyengar, one of the founding fathers who brought yoga into the Western world. So mindfulness is this practice of pausing and noticing anything we can in the present moment, our internal sensations, our breath, our thoughts, our emotions, and also the people that we are with in that moment. And when we can increase our capacity to be aware more often, we start to become increasingly resilient. So wherever you are, whatever you're doing, tune in. What do you feel in your body? How is the mind? Are you holding any pain in your face, in tension or restlessness in the body? Can you ground through the feet or sit in a posture and in an energetic facial expression that communicates well-being and safety back to the brain? And try to choose this over and over again, knowing that over time, you are actually changing the function of your brain and nervous system towards increasing resilience, physical well-being, and optimal mental health. Thank you for joining me at Root Cause of Happiness. If this information was useful to you, please share it with others seeking knowledge and tools for resilience. It is a meaningful contribution to the world when we become proactive in our healing journeys, by learning and growing, by increasing our awareness, by addressing the root cause of happiness.